Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho, and in today's video, we are taking a look at those top transfers going into Game Week 11. We're going to prioritise those premium forwards and some of those budget midfielders. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like and of course, smash that subscribe button. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So first up, as I mentioned, I really want to touch on these premium forwards because I think a lot of the conversation over the last few weeks has all been about the budget forwards, Chris Wood, Cunha, Visser, just to name a few. But I really do think we might be getting into the sort of time of year where the premium forwards really do stand out as the best value picks in the game in that forward department. There's been a lot of talk about selling Haaland, currently the most sold player, and I do think there is justification maybe to come down from him, not all the way to the budget forwards, but to this bracket of forwards. And we're going to take a look at these four here. Dominic Solanke, of course, off the back of that 16-point haul in Game Week 10. Congratulations to anybody that actually did keep hold of him. Nicholas Jackson, a little bit disappointing in Game Week 10, but still putting up great numbers. Alexander Isak, a little bit of a rejuvenation. We're seeing the best of him over the last 3 games. And of course, Ollie Watkins, Mr. Consistent. So the big question is, first and foremost, who is the best one? And then secondly, should we actually be spending the money to come up from our cheaper forwards or downgrade from Erling Haaland? So first up, we have to talk about Dominic Solanke. Everybody who kept hold of him were rewarded in Game Week 10, and I still think there are going to be rewards in Game Week 11 at home against Ipswich. It's worth noting, when we look at the actual underlying numbers over the course of the season, so the opening 10 game weeks, they've actually been really good. I know a lot of people have been worried about him over the past 2 or 3 game weeks, but again, there are so many factors that we need to take into consideration if you're just analysing the last few games. And Solanke's numbers at 0.63 per 90 have always been solid. And what's really interesting to me is a lot of people are saying that Dominic Solanke has been dropping deep, being much more of a Harry Kane character, linking up the play, being creative. Well, at 0.06 expected assists, that's not necessarily painting the whole picture. So I still think he is a brilliant goal threat in this Spurs team. Big chances at 1.27 as well. Is second best on this list, but still good regardless. The big problem with Solanke, of course, is that Ipswich at home is brilliant, but then Man City away. Is that a tough fixture right now? You can be the judge of that. Then Fulham at home and Bournemouth away. Now, in terms of Nicholas Jackson, I would argue, in terms of longevity, in terms of fixtures, this is probably the pick. Yes, Arsenal at home is not the entry point for many people, but then Leicester away, Villa at home, and then Southampton away is a really good set of fixtures, and they actually continue beyond that until the new year. Nicholas Jackson's numbers, very similar to that of Solanke's in terms of XG per 90. Expected assists slightly higher and basically the same in terms of big chances. So Nicholas Jackson is basically the same as Dominic Solanke, but I would argue that Jackson probably has slightly more rotation risk in the sense of Christopher Nkunku. Now, Jackson will start pretty much every game as long as he is fit, but there is definitely the risk of rotation during this busy Christmas period. But I still think Nicholas Jackson long-term is a fantastic pick for our teams, and he does a bit of both. Contributes in terms of the goals and in terms of the creativity in this Chelsea team. Now, finally, the last two before we come to some sort of conclusion. Alexander Isak only just coming on radar. He was the talk of the town during pre-season, picked up the injury, a little bit of a slow start. We're finally seeing the best of him now. 0.45 expected goals per 90 over these last 10 game weeks, but we are, as I mentioned, only seeing the best of him now. 0.8 big chances per 90 is a slight concern, and I would expect in some of these better fixtures for that to improve. But the big thing is, are the fixtures worth investing in? Forest have proved to be a tough cookie recently, so I don't think that is a great entry point. West Ham at home is great in Game Week 12, then Palace away, leaking goals, then Liverpool at home. So I think, similar to Nicholas Jackson, you don't really look to invest in Isak this week. It very much is a case of next week. Finally, Ollie Watkins. Now, at 9 million, we really have to be confident in investing in Ollie Watkins to pay the premium, especially when we've got people like Solanke at 1.4 million cheaper. Now, the underlying numbers are great. 0.75 expected goals per 90. He always is going to be the one that has the best numbers because we have seen it now over the last 18 months that this guy is consistently the man in this Aston Villa team. 1.5 big chances per 90 as well. Yes, there is that hindrance in terms of John Duran. I do think he will steal minutes off him, whether it be a start in one of maybe the next 6 games, because we need to remember Villa trying to manage Champions League and Premier League and a busy period. I think there could be some rotation in Ollie Watkins in either the Brentford game or the following Southampton game in game week 14, I believe. So we need to keep an eye on that because John Duran is definitely knocking on the door. But one thing we need to remember is that John Duran is actually taking minutes away from other assets in the team, like a Morgan Rogers. So I don't think Watkins is just a direct rotation risk, but his minutes are definitely a problem longer term in terms of those 90 minutes. So to conclude, we need to remember that game week 12 is probably the entry point for a lot of these forwards. Very much the case of Jackson, ISAK, and Ollie Watkins. If you own Dominic Solanke, I would absolutely keep and reassess after the international break. If you have the funds available to go to someone like a Nicholas Jackson, I do like it. I think the Chelsea team are good offensively. I think Nicholas Jackson's minutes are great. And I don't see much rotation risk long-term for him, as I would see with someone like a Ollie Watkins. Alexander Isak is probably the punt, but at 8.3 million, with Callum Wilson returning from injury very soon, I would be a little bit concerned about Isak's minutes over the Christmas period, as historically, he is a guy who obviously picks up a few niggles here and there. So to conclude, if I had to pick one right now, I think it would be Nicholas Jackson. However, I do think very quickly Alexander Isak is going to be on everybody's radar. I just think I want to see a little bit more from him and Newcastle in general before we look to invest in him. I wouldn't be buying Ollie Watkins right now because of that rotation risk, and Solanke is a keep, but I wouldn't necessarily say he's a buy. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Now let's take a look at some budget midfielders. So next up, I want to take a look at some of these budget midfielders in the game. And the two standout options right now are really going to be Morgan Rogers at Aston Villa and Semenyo at Bournemouth. Now, of course, both of these did score in game week 10. So that really does help the case when we are analysing both of those. But they have both been over the opening 10 game weeks probably the standout options. Now, Rogers being the slightly cheaper pick, he originally started at 5 million, now up to 5.4 million. A real reflection on how good he has been. 0.3 XG per 90, 0.31 expected assist per 90 is ridiculous. Playing in an Aston Villa team who are always solid. Yes, as I mentioned, I am a little bit concerned about fatigue in this Aston Villa team and rotation with a busy Christmas period and managing the Champions League. But Morgan Rogers has proved that he is a bit of a minutes monster. And if anybody's going to get consistent minutes over the next 8 game weeks, I do think it still will be Rogers in this Aston Villa team. 2.1 shots per 90 is still solid. And when we take a look at someone like Semenyo, he has been an absolute monster in terms of shot volume. 4.4 shots per 90 and 0.54 expected goals per 90. Some ridiculous underlying numbers and even some creative numbers at 0.22 expected assists per 90. And you can see with the expected FPL points, 6.13, and he's actually only delivered 4.51. So you would argue that he's actually been underperforming to some extent, same as that of Morgan Rogers. Now, when we take a look at the coming fixtures for Bournemouth, Brentford away, I don't think is a fixture we should be scared about. Then Brighton at home, Wolves away who are having their troubles, then Spurs at home, and we've seen how good Bournemouth can be at home against the big teams. In terms of Aston Villa, a little bit more mixed. Villa away, Crystal Palace at home is great, and I don't think Chelsea away is too bad. Then Brentford at home. Now, if I was to invest in one right now, I do think I would actually lean towards Semenyo if you had the funds available. I think Bournemouth long-term fixtures are really good. Similar can be said of that of Aston Villa, but as I mentioned, just because of that extra game in terms of the Champions League that they can have each and every week, I think Semenyo is the one that slightly gets the pick. But of course, if money is a problem in your team and you can get to Morgan Rogers, then I do think he is a great pickup. The final thing we need to answer is in terms of a team structure, I actually think you could have both of these in your team. I think you could easily have someone like a Salah, another premium, Brian Mbeumo, or someone of that price, and then actually have Rogers and Semenyo as a 4th and 5th midfielder. I really do believe they are putting up the numbers to justify being a double up in your team, allowing you to bench one of those if you have 3 forwards that do play. And even in a week where you have to play both of those, look at game week 12, you could easily play Rodgers and Semenyo together. And I would even argue in game week 14, is it the worst case scenario if you played both Rodgers and Semenyo in your team? I think the answer is going to be no. So anybody that is in a position right now where they're looking to wildcard in game week 12, I would firmly consider both of these on your wildcard, which will then allow you to have some of those premium forwards that we previously discussed in the other section. So let me know who your favourite is in the comments section. For me, it is just going to be Antoine Semenyo. Now, finally, I feel like we haven't touched on defenders much on these top transfer videos, so I feel like it's only time for us to get them involved. And I have 3 budget options here for you. Lewis Hall at Newcastle, Kirkes of Bournemouth, and Man United's Mazraoui. Now, first up, we need to talk about Lewis Hall because he put in a fantastic performance in game week 10 against Bukayo Saka, and he has been very good for Newcastle. Start of the season, we spoke about his value. He then came out of the team for a little bit of a period, but it seems like he has now established himself in that Newcastle team. And a 4.3 million, I think a lot of managers do need to have him on their radar. So 0.23 expected assists per 90 is really solid. It's the best of the 3 that we're looking at here. And the attempted assist per 90 at 1.68. He is actually being a bit of a creative option in this Newcastle team. He isn't just being one of those back 3 defenders that sits for build-up play. He is actually being expected to kick on and contribute in the final third, which is actually a real bonus at 4.3 million. When we take a look at someone like a Kirkes, decent underlying numbers, 0.12 expected assists per 90, attempted assists at nearly 1, but he is actually getting a little bit of shot volume at 0.75 per 90, much better than that of Lewis Hall's. And with Bournemouth, we know that they can put anybody at a game at home, similar to that of Newcastle. Finally, we've got Mazraoui. Now, this one, very much a guy who you're bringing in just for the Man United defence. And I would say the Man United defence haven't been terrible this season. And with a new manager coming in, I would say Mazraoui is very much more of the riskier pick because he is the more expensive of the 3. And you're very much bringing him in with no idea where he's actually going to play. Now, some people are talking about Amarim will come in with a wing-back system, and that could mean that Mazraoui suddenly becomes an essential defender in the game. But also, could the argument be he might even play as part of the back 3? And then all you've got is basically a centre-back in your teams at 4.5 million. Man United's short-term fixtures are great. Leicester followed by Ipswich and then Everton at home. And I do think if you want to jump on a Man United defender, it would be Mazraoui. But I think if you're looking more long-term, I actually do think Lewis Hall at 4.3 million is offering fantastic value. Now, of course, the only issue we do have is, could we eventually see Dan Burn step in at left back once Botman returns? Quite possibly. That is absolutely a situation that could happen. But while Lewis Hall and Livramento are putting in the performances that they are, and Newcastle are slightly turning the tide in terms of their overall results, I think Lewis Hall keeps his place. And a 4.3 million, in terms of a game week 12 entry point at home against West Ham, I think that is the time to do so. I think Kirkes, for me, I think Bournemouth just away from home are unpredictable, and I don't think I really would want to go there. I'd rather go Lewis Hall. But again, if you're looking for a defender this week, I do like Mazraoui as an entry point if you can't wait till game week 12 for Lewis Hall. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So finally, we need to take a look at game week 11 and the predicted points, because I'm going to put it out there. I think this is going to be one of the toughest game weeks for captaincy. Not necessarily because obviously we have bad options. I just think it's a case of teams are very split right now. We got some managers who are all in on Erling Haaland. We got some managers with no Haaland, Mo Salah. We got some with no Salah, no Haaland, and I've got people like Son and Cole Palmer. So it is very divisive going into game week 11. Now, you can see top of the list is going to be Son at 7.3 predicted points. As a manager that owns him, I am delighted to see that. Of course, the problem with Son is playing 55 minutes in game week 10 is that a bit of a red flag. Now, of course, on Thursday, they do have their Europa League game, so we need to assess what exactly happens with Son. But again, we have to paint our own narratives here. If Son doesn't travel with the squad, is that actually good news? Is that bad news? For me, just to put my cards on the table, I feel like Son going off in the 55th minute, he was surprised, he was angry. I think that was the sport doctors telling him that based on just the general science that we have nowadays. I think with the Richarlison injury, I think Son's minutes are going to heavily improve in this Ipswich game unless we see anything bad on Thursday night. And I'm going to put my head on the line here and say, I do think Son is the best captaincy option. I have to say that because, of course, I own him as well, and it'd be terrible if I don't captain him myself. But I do think he is the standout option, and I do think we will get 75 to 80 minutes of him in game week 11. Now, looking outside of Son, if you want to play safe, I do think Mo Salah is the choice at 6.9 predicted points. Obviously, Villa at home in game week 11, and with Villa playing in the Champions League, I think they have been a little bit lackluster in the game after Champions League fixtures. And I think Liverpool, because they're dominating the ball so much more in both the Champions League and the Premier League, they are not getting fatigued like some other teams. So I think Mo Salah is the safe pick. For those that kept Erling Haaland, you'll be happy to know 6.1 predicted points. Yes, they got battered in the Champions League, but I always back Erling Haaland to score. And if you're a manager that doesn't have Son, doesn't have Mo Salah, I would still confidently put the captaincy on Haaland and not panic about it too much. Outside of that, Mbeumo, an interesting differential captain. Personally, I don't love it. I would much rather go for some of the premiums. Johnson, again, not a captaincy pick, but still a great option for those managers that do have him. And Cole Palmer at 5.2. Again, I just cannot put a captaincy on someone who is playing a top team like Arsenal. Outside of that, if you want to go differential with Solanke, 4.6 predicted points, a very interesting pick there. So let me know who your captain is in the comments section. I'll be super interested to know. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in today's video. If you have any questions, pop them in the comment section and make sure you do like and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.